Well, I met my guest today at the Natural Products Expo in Anaheim this past March. There were thousands of booths filled with people presenting their natural products, and there were upwards of about 20,000 people walking around. And I had the opportunity to sit down with Dr. Larry Weiss at the show and talk about his passion, which is keeping people healthy by doing something quite simple, and that's washing our hands. And all these booths and all these people just sort of melted away as I sat there talking with Dr. Weiss. I was in the moment and listening to his story about why he started his company, and those 15 minutes really stood out in my mind. And I knew I just had to have him as a guest on my show. Welcome, Dr. Weiss.
Hi, Beth. Thank you very much for having me and the very flattering introduction.
Let me read a little bit about your background. You're founder and chief scientist at CleanWell, a San Francisco-based company that makes soaps and hand sanitizers using a unique natural antimicrobial technology. Dr. Weiss got his MD from Stanford Medical School and has a background in clinical medicine, physiology, infection control, the chemistry of natural products, as well as the study of the causes, patterns, and prevention of illness. So, as I said, we met at the Natural Products Expo and had such a great conversation. And share with our listeners what motivated you to leave private practice and get involved with soap, of all things.
That's a great question. In the practice of medicine, we get a chance to do a lot of good for the patients that we're taking care of. But in terms of a big picture, there aren't a lot of opportunities where you can have a real impact on public health. So when they come along, they're quite compelling. Probably a seminal event in this was I was doing a consulting project in infection control and with the military, and the Navy had just conducted a study at the Navy Great Lakes Training Center, which is north of Chicago. And this is where they train about 40 or 50,000 sailors every year, and they're there for about 8 weeks. And during their tenure there, about 90% of them get sick with respiratory or gastrointestinal illness. The study they did was they got them to wash their hands. In fact, they ordered them to wash their hands with soap and water 5 times a day. And because they were under orders to do it, about half of them actually did it. The impact was that they reduced respiratory illness by almost 50% with just a simple, low-concept intervention as hand washing. Now, we all have known that this makes a difference, but as you start looking back at the history of infection control, it's a human behavior problem. This is something that our mothers have been telling us from the time that we were able to understand them to wash our hands, and because we have such poor compliance, no one has ever really solved that. Instead, what we've done is we've thrown technology, mostly chemistry, at it, which didn't solve the behavior problem and then layered on top of it the chemistry problem. As I was pondering this particular conundrum, a little company in Canada popped up on the radar. Now, before I was a physician, I was a natural products chemist. And we knew that several plant oils, particularly thyme and oregano, were very good. These plants were very good at killing bacteria, but we'd never been able to figure out how to turn them into products that would pass the regulatory standards to be able to make the claims in the market. The history of their use as antiseptics and as preservative literally goes back thousands of years, and they are found throughout the plant kingdom. Most of us smart scientists figured the problem was impossible. A little Canadian company that was started because this young man had a son who was born with an unusual immune deficiency. And he was told he was going to have to keep the house very clean, and his son was going to have to get gamma globulin injections, etc. And they brought home commercial cleaning products, and everyone started getting sick.
Wow.
So his mother, who was an amateur aromacologist, decided to do something that none of us would have done, and that was the key, the Rosetta Stone to this technology. And when that popped up, that brought together for me the opportunity to take what I'd seen in clinical medicine, what I'd seen with the stuff with the Navy, and put this together with the chemistry and give people products they actually liked using, solving several things at once. One, actually improving compliance, so we got better hand washing, and 2, getting a lot of very bad chemistry out of people's lives.
Well, now, just go back to 1 second. You said that the mother did something. So what did she do that was so radical?
Well, what she did is she looked at the problem very differently. We are surrounded by the brilliance of nature. And we have, in our emergence into science in the past 150 or so years, become quite arrogant to figure that we could solve it all on our own. She looked at exactly how these things worked in plants and figured out that a lot of it had to do with the way that they were put together, with what was in the water. And it was a rather simple intervention, and that was really the key. We then took that technology. I founded this company with the design firm IDEO here in Palo Alto in San Francisco, and decided to take this and turn it into products that took the benefit of her learning, advanced the technology through several generations, and turned them into products that are, the key to compliance. The key to getting people to actually wash their hands and do all the things that our mothers told us to, wash our hands and clean up our room, is you have to feel good about doing it.
Right. And you mentioned this ritual. You wanted people to get into a hand-washing kind of ritual. Can you talk about that?
Sure. We spent a lot of time looking at why people don't wash their hands. And people will give you lots and lots of reasons why. But the common thread we found was more or less simply stated that everyone has a problem with authority and nobody likes being told what to do. Mm-hmm. There's another component to this, which is the product of hand washing is the absence of illness. So you don't get anything that alerts you to the fact that you've gotten any kind of benefit from it.
So in other words, if you get sick, you don't look back and think, oh, wait a minute, it's because I didn't wash my hands, when that could actually be the cause of it.
Well, let's just say that I'm sure that the statement you just made doesn't go through the heads of too many people who are sick.
Uh-huh.
They attribute it to someone else, perhaps, but it's unlikely that people will say, gee, if I washed my hands more frequently, perhaps I wouldn't be sick.
Right. I think most people think, oh, well, someone sneezed on me or I was exposed to something. So the path of entry then is from the hand to the nose or the mouth. Is that the case?
There's 2 different ways. One is droplet transmission. So if someone sneezes very close to you, it's possible that you can get an infectious dose just from the droplets that are still suspended in the air. Probably the bulk of transmission is, with a final common pathway, is the hands. So those droplets land on surfaces, hands touch surfaces, your hands touch surfaces, and before you get a chance to wash those freeloading germs off, you touch your eyes, nose, or mouth, and perhaps deliver enough to get an infectious dose. Mm-hmm. What we know from the Navy study is if you actually improve hand hygiene, you can make a huge difference, perhaps as much as 50%. So if I were to tell you I had something here that would reduce the amount of respiratory, that's colds and flu, mm-hmm. in the community by 50%, and it was a drug, it would be $1 billion drug.
Right.
What it is the most important medical invention of all time, and that is soap and water, except I can't seem to get people to do it. So I was saying everyone sort of has a disinclination to doing this because nobody likes being told what to do. And the other component about this is that they don't really feel particularly good about doing it in most of the public settings because they're just not really designed for hygiene. How often have you looked at the sink in a public restroom or a restaurant and said, there's nothing I'm going to do over there that's going to make me feel very much cleaner?
Well, plus the fact that they're giving you the disgusting pink soap or, that blue soap that I hate the smell of it. So I'm reluctant to even want to, use that. I'll run my hands under hot water, but
exactly.
Yeah.
So what we decided to do here at CleanWell was take this technology, put it together in products that smelled good, felt good, were built entirely out of natural materials. So all of the materials that give it its feel and its fragrance and everything else are essentially solving the problem the same way that nature did. And while we were trying to figure out why people didn't wash their hands, so here we had this, we wanted to build a repetitive, self-reinforcing behavior, that would be hand washing, when people already had a disinclination to doing it, and there was no connection between the benefit of doing it and the activity itself. And if you phrase the question that way, that sounds like a very formidable problem. But we turned it on its head. And we said, let's look at some repetitive reinforcing behaviors with no benefit that people engage in and see how it was that they evolved.